Again, it depends on how far south I am.
That gives you more people.
Yeah. And then, as I said, on 98% of the days, you get down there and you're 2,000 feet higher than you were back up.
So time of day, any particular time that you should really think, okay, time to go back, or I mean?
Oh, in terms of turning around,
That depends on how early in the season it is.
yeah, it depends on how long the day is. It depends on the time of day it is. But and it depends whether it's a blue day or a day with clouds. My thinking is usually, especially for newer pilots, you should have made it back to the Hernandez area by 4 p.m. Would be a good recommendation. Yeah, that's a conservative thing. Usually there's lift there at 5 p.m. and beyond. And again, it's much easier to make these decisions when there's a large group of pilots.
And the cloud street.
Yeah, it's easiest when there's a cloud street. It's also easy, if there's other pilots on the radio reporting conditions at various places. So, those are the most important airstrips. And of those, 4, Pinoche, the Hernandez area airstrips, 5, the new Hollister and Avenal, except for the Hernandez area airstrips, the others are all absolutely aerotow retrieving. Now, then there's some other airstrips that you should know about that are not as critical. But, if you ended up low, you might find yourself using this airstrip that we're actually landing on. One is Mercy Hot Springs. It's about 8 nautical miles north of Pinoche. So really only an issue if you somehow got low up in here. The Mercy Hot Springs strip, I've landed a Citabria there. I'd aerotow a glider off of it. It's 2,000 feet long dirt, about 40 feet wide. The biggest issue with that airstrip is there's probably some brush close to the edges, especially the northern stretch. And in the middle stretch of it, the airstrip is elevated above the ground on either side. And therefore, if you touch down and said, I think I'll roll off the runway in the middle, you will all of a sudden have a 4-foot drop to the ground. So stop in the middle if you're recommended. To my knowledge, nobody's had to land a glider there. I don't know if anybody's ever actually landed there. Going south, other airstrips that you should know about, there is a New Idria airstrip out here. It's very faint and hard to see. It hasn't been used by anybody as an airstrip for probably 10 years or something. About 5 years ago, I went out and walked it, and I said, this is great, I would aerotow off of most of this. It's got some open holes. That's one where, like for many of these things, the homework assignment I would give to everybody is to take this list of airstrips, pull up the database that's got the latitude and longitude, plug those into Google Earth, and find these things.
Actually, you can just download the KML file.
There's a KML file available.
From the third point database.
Yeah.
And plug into Google Earth, and you get them all.
You get them all, and then.
Now, Harry, New India, I believe there are 2 strips there, right?
Yeah, it's crossing runways.
No, I mean 2 places. One is fields and one is
Idria Field is a place where Hugo landed his DG-800 about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was somehow put into the database as a place where a glider landed without being broken into many pieces.
I know of another field where a glider was broken.
You don't want to know about that one.
So you put a big red X on that.
So the recommended is really the airstrip, not the fields.
Those 2, I'd probably take this. I mean, you're going further east to get
But I think Rami went and walked that like 3 years ago, and he said he didn't like the airstrip at all. He said he'd way go to the field before they.
Okay, well, then maybe the Gophers have done a lot of good work on that. There's also Canada. There's a lot of pasture out there, and there are dirt roads through pastures, and as long as you can see that there's not a fence along the edge of that road, dirt roads through pastures are often the equivalent of dirt runways. So things to think about.
So what's the name of this one?
New Idria. It's the New Idria Valley. And then as you go further south, on the west side of the range here, while Avenal is out here, there's a couple of strips, Indian Valley and Pine Canyon, that I've had to rely on from time to time. I've never had to land at them. Indian Valley is a dirt strip that kind of slopes up from the west side towards the east, and you probably land uphill this way. It's sort of in a side canyon of this valley here. Pine Canyon, from the air, really just looks like a road through a pasture. But I think some of the Avenal guys have landed in Pine Canyon.
Yeah, maybe. Tom Hubbard, I think, landed there.
Yeah, Hubbard, yeah, he did.
One of the things that the reason Pine Canyon is key is that a lot of times the really good lift, if you get low out there, is on the back side of Black Mountain.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to give Avenal up and use that. But it works. I mean, I've dug out of there before.
Backside being west side?
West side, yeah.
There's an EL7 there now. It's over some microwave, it is incredibly loud.
Oh, yeah, that's down in this corner. There's a radio station right down on the truck.
Mhm.
And then
Here, you can see.
I wanted to mention some other areas where there's no airstrips, but there's potentially landable fields. There's in the Priest Valley here, which is between these two ridges. Out here by Mon Oak, there's often mowed fields out there. I've bicycled through there, and a lot of those look pretty good. They look good from the air. And then there's a little north of that, this area around San Benito, there's farm fields. Who was it? Julie landed there. You've landed there?
I've landed there. Hans got me.
So there, you know, these are obviously not places that you plan to rely on, but if you really needed to, you probably find them.
Yeah, you need to be careful in that area, because a lot of them turn to vineyards, and then sometimes they tear them up or each stakes all over the place.
That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
And in the area, they look okay from the side of the road, it's like, oh, that's a disaster. Yeah.
Well, in general, you know, when it comes to farm fields in California, you know, if you look at the Salinas Valley or areas around Hollister where it's really intensively farmed, a lot of those fields are disasters for riders because there's deep furrows, there's sprinkler pipes everywhere, and you know, in some cases there's vineyards with stakes and things like that. It actually, as you get back into these drier areas, you're more likely to just find a hayfield that got mowed. And my experience, you know, almost all my landouts have been in hayfields, and they've been as smooth as a runway most of the time. Maybe I've just been lucky. Mowed hayfields are usually good spots. Anyway, and then I'm going to mention just very briefly, it is possible some days that there could be lift on the Gavilan Range, which is the range. Here's Salinas, here's the Salinas Valley, it's the range along the northeast side of the Salinas Valley. And when you're flying that range, you're really using the Salinas Valley airstrips as you're out. And you've got Salinas itself, you've got the King City, Mesa del Rey, this Metz gravel strip down here is good. I would recommend against Clark, because it's narrow with vineyards real close in. The database has a Soledad Duster strip, which is kind of tight, but it's doable by an experienced pilot in a 15-meter glider. And Fat City
Is
isn't.
it so tight that it doesn't fit in 18?
You can do it in 18. You'll just find that it's intimidating to look at because there
Well,
are
the 15
rows
we've
of
done.
trees. Your 18 meter with 15 meter.
15 off the wall.
There's in the database, there's this place called Fat City. It used to be a paved airstrip. It usually has vehicles parked on it now. So it's not really good. And don't be intimidated by the possibility of landing at Salinas if you ever had to. You obviously have to look up the tower frequency and talk to the tower. But
They're real friendly for
Yeah.
runners.
yeah, they're, you
I
know,
landed there.
it gives them something interesting to do.
Yeah.
When you're really low and desperate,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've never had to land there, although I've been to the point where I was just about to intrude into their airspace, so I called them up on the radio and said, hey, I'm on the edge of your airspace. I'm hoping not to land, but something like that. But they don't.
Typically a pretty quick arrow retrieve out from Hollister too.
From Salinas, yeah.
Yeah, from Salinas and back,
Yeah,
just
it's pretty
boom over the hill.
Yeah, so you're targeting the tower.
But that is only very, very occasionally that you end up that far west, right?
Yes,
For beginners.
yeah.
Yeah, there'll be those days when you look over at San Lucias and you'll see clouds over there. And you'll be maybe 12,000, 13,000 feet over Bonitos, and you can just put King City right underneath you and just go into the hills. And if you don't connect with it, you come back like King City, but a lot of times you'll connect, and then It's an amazing thing to be 12,000 feet over the coastline.
Yeah. But that whole run to the west for beginners, I think, is a
No.
little bit more scary than for
Yeah,
the
if you,
experience.
if you feel it, if it's a super day and we're getting to 14,000 feet at Hernandez,
Okay.
Yeah, that's the day that it may happen.
yeah, and you float across and we're getting to 12,000 feet on this ridge line
But you're
here.
still in final glide to Hollister.
Yeah, it's only a cross-country flight from the end of your toe until the bottom of this
Yeah.
toe. Yeah. We're within glide of Hollister.
Do you have a flight that shows the path on the west side?
No, I don't have one here. And as we said, it's actually pretty rare that we fly the Gavilan. It's more likely to fly the Gavilan early in the spring when there's a lot of moisture and therefore there's clouds along that range. And we can do it, a more local tow. So those are airstrips. The other things that's in here are these landmarks to talk about. And, there's a bunch of them in this database, other than but the key ones to talk about that are in the database that I think you really should make a point to, look at them in the Google Earth KML file, mark them on your sectional, is the elevators, meaning, places that reliable lifts off, elevator 1, elevator 2. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to elevator 3, and I'm not sure it's in the right place here. Elevator 4 or 5. What else have I got listed here? Oh, there's Chemise, which is a fire lookout here at the west end of the Pinoche Valley. And occasionally you get days when the convergence is more to the west than the east, and you'll be on tow, and people will say, don't go to elevator 1, go to Chemise. And we'll start filling there. There's San Benito Mountain in this range with microwave towers overlooking Highway 5. Then as you continue down, there's this range that's got Center Peak, which is both a landmark and a lift source, good lift source usually. And then on the western edge of the Priest Valley, there's a VOR. So if you have a VOR in your glider, you can if not, you look for that circular cleared area with the circular gizmo antenna thing out there. And then a little further down the range is a lookout tower that's marked in your database as lookout. And these are landmarks that other people have got in their GPS, and they're going to use to tell you, hey, I found a great thermal 2 miles north up the range from Lookout. And that's why I've listed these as key ones to learn about. And then further down here at the end of the range, basically, is this place we call Black Mountain. I think its official name is Castle Peak, but all the glider pilots call it Black Mountain, so it got misnamed. And that misnaming will stick. Further, once you get there, you look out, and the mountains kind of peter out, and there's a gap east of Paso Robles where the highways go through. And then the world starts to pick up again further south. And if you're got a great day and you're ambitious, if you go across that, if you can cross that gap, you can go down to the Nucleum area and come back, and that's a 500-kilometer out and return. And there are days when the clouds mark the gap. Now even then, for a beginner, I would say you might dabble by going to those clouds and turning around without doing the 500K. You gotta make good speed to make a 500K and get back without the lift giving up on you.
I have a question. So the range that we normally fly, is that the Diablos?
Yeah, the Diablo range really covers everything from
Mount Diablo.
Mount Diablo and Mount Hamilton down to
San Benito Mountain.
about here. Yeah. And then there's specific peaks within there, San Benito Mountain, things like that. There's a few places to avoid. One of them is there is parachuting at Tres Pinos, just about 10 miles or 7 miles from Hollister. And you just don't want to fly through that because you might get hit with a meat missile.
So on the way out, you're usually not there.
But on the
On the
toe,
range to the east of that, or
yeah, on the toe out, you're going to be northeast of it. And usually on the glide back, you're going to be northeast of it. There's the Bickle airstrip. So basically, usually on the glide back, you almost go right over the top of Bickle. And as long as you stay on that line that goes Bickle straight to Hollister, you're okay. Just don't wander off this way.
Is that spot marked ranch, is that release ranch?
That ranch there? Is it that one? I think this one might be.
Oh, that's it,
Might be
yeah.
that
Where
one.
the thermal is. right
Yeah, where that
there.
thermal is. Yeah, now this flight trace is not a totally typical flight trace.
It's Ronnie's.
It's Ronnie's, yes, but it's not a typical day either. So, yeah, so, as I said, you typically are gonna tow to about 6,200 feet, release, and glide towards this elevator 1 ridge here. And elevator 1 is marked as a spot kind of in the middle of this 3 or 4 mile stretch of ridge. And what I usually find I do is, I just aim for the end of the ridge and just work your way down looking for lift. On this day, he found his first thermal at the east end of the ridge. You might find it anywhere along there. And especially the first day of the season that I fly here, I have to discipline myself to take crappy little thermals at the start. Especially if you've been flying in the mountains, you've been flying at Truckee or something, and you're like, yeah, I get off tow and get 8 knots. It's cloud base, that's what happens all the time. And you come here and you go, that was only 2 knots, I'm not taking that. That was only 3 knots, I'm not taking that. And you're gonna wash out and land. No, you can do that. So you gotta be willing to take those little bumpers. If there's other people on course and somebody says, hey, right over the marked EL1, I got 6 knots, go there and see what you can find. But otherwise, you may arrive here at 5,500 feet, and you really got about 1,000 feet to work with before you have to start thinking about am I landing. So, take those little bumps to get you 500 feet or 1,000 feet. Just looking at those crappy thermals. And then a lot of times you might start out 1.5 knots, and then it's a bunch of little cores, and you can't really core it, and you gain 1,000 feet, and they've all merged together, and now you're climbing at 4 knots. And they keep on going and climbing at 5 knots. But the most typical thing here, most typical route, is you climb there, and then you just head straight for the elevator 2 area, and maybe just a little bit west of that onto this ridge, the main ridge. There are some days when there's good lift on this ridge immediately south of the Pinocchio airstrip. But, more typical day, you just come straight across here.
How far is it?
Let's see, it is about 11 or 12 nautical miles. Like that. So, and typically if you get to say, you might get 6,000 feet here. And 6,000 is about what I'd look for before I move on. If I can get to 7 or 8, I'll take it. But you probably want at least 6,000 here before you commit to make that jump. And then if it's a good day, a reasonable day, you'll get down in the elevator 2 area and you get a little higher. And then you'll work your way down along these ridges and over one side or the other, past the Hernandez Reservoir, down to the elevator 4 area, and then you'll get a really good.
So when you're talking 6,000 feet, how far above is the area?
Well, these peaks are about 4,000. The original is about 4,000 along here. So, a couple thousand feet above there. And you keep going. If you're not getting above, say, 8,000 feet at elevator 4, I would not go beyond that. Because you need to have enough altitude to explore towards center peak and possibly turn around. And if it's 8,000 here, it might only be 6,000 in the center, and that's more of the master class to get to 6,000 and get back here without landing out and get back up. Yeah. So, all of these elevators that are in the file, these are places that have been shown to be usually reliable lift, sometimes right at that spot, not always right at that spot. It might be a mile this way, it might be 2 miles that way. It might not be there at all. They're all just recommendations. And besides those, the high ground is where your best prospect of lift is. The other thing that's very important flying here is that it's usually convergence line soaring. And in the sense that there's thermals, but the thermals are being herded by surface winds coming from both directions. So there's one mass of air that's coming down these valleys and then turning in, and there's another mass of air out here in the central valley. And you can look at like the RAS split maps, and they have a surface wind